that we will be doing today. The module, as I said yesterday, is actually quite. It can be a lot of fun, and selling sometimes. We touched on it yesterday. Selling sometimes has that image of, you know what. If you don't really know what to do, try something. Try selling, because we sell. Like you see on the screen there. We sell on a daily basis. If you're trying to convince somebody else in a debate about your point, you want to bring your point across. You're selling your points to convince the other person, to persuade the other person that your opinion is the correct opinion. So by nature, we are selling anyway. Although we might not be in a profession where we make money from our selling skills, but we all have skills to sell. If these specific characteristics of selling is stronger in some individuals, they might even pursue a career in sales. And it's not what it was many years ago, where the selling profession had a bad reputation. And obviously it has evolved as well with the changes in technology, the way in which we sell. But we'll address that as we progress through the course. Hi, Brody. And as I said yesterday, the basic traditional skills to sell, to make a sale, has not changed. Because of the global pandemic that we're experiencing at the moment, we had to adapt and we had to modify and change the way in which we do certain steps in the selling cycle. And we'll do the steps in the selling cycle during the course of today's session. Right, let me just see. I want to see while I'm talking, I'm also ticking off as students join on the attendance. We've almost got a full house on Centurion, but the Babel students are sadly. It's not the weather's good, sun's out, and Cape Town's weather's fine today. Maybe that's the reason why they're not in class. But anyway, as I said, selling, it's not necessarily a profession for everybody, but it's definitely something that everybody can do. We do it in our daily walks of life, and for some, it actually, and if there's any short course, I mean, and the value, you might not specifically see yourself in sales, but the value of a module like this, the skills that you pick up in a module like personal selling, can help you a great deal in a range of careers. If you actually always wanted to become a lawyer, certain skills of negotiation, listening to objections, strategizing to reply to the objection that was made. That at the end of the day, and more specifically, I think, although the topic is selling, the most important part of selling, in my opinion, is the ability to listen to the customer. And that is, I think, the secret to being a successful salesperson. We'll address that when we do in chapter 3, communication. It's extremely important that we have the ability to listen, and for a very good reason. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. He wants us to listen before we speak, and not the other way around. I think that's where that traditional image of a salesperson, that smooth talking individual who doesn't take no for an answer, have that, you almost say yes just to get rid of the person. That kind of obnoxiousness was evident among many salespeople. But you have to be thick-skinned, I think, when you're in selling. It's definitely not an easy career. You are definitely going to get more no's than yeses, and we all know that people are not don't deal very well with receiving negative replies most of the time. But in sales, you're going to get more no's than yeses before you actually make or close a transaction. Right. If you look at the history of selling, people, it's one of the oldest professions. We can literally say that, I mean, the snake was trying to sell to sell the forbidden fruit to Eve in the Garden of Eden. But if we don't take it literally, but we do it more physically, very early on in the Bible, you can even read in Exodus of where women and children were sold for slaves. So it is a very old profession. And yeah, basically we can say that's, if we have to look at the history of selling, that's probably where it's all started. It has definitely had a interesting impact on everybody's daily lives. For instance, if there weren't salespeople in the world, we would not know of the existence of many products. We might feel sometimes that maybe I should not because I don't really need this product or use this product often enough. But I think if we look at, and now for those who can still remember, and if you don't, then we'll quickly just touch on it again. Take yourselves back about 6 months to the start of the first semester when we did business marketing. We did different marketing philosophies or marketing orientations. Now, your sales, the role of the sales profession, of the role of selling has changed as those philosophies changed as well. Initially, especially when there's a production, with the production orientated philosophy, businesses were very arrogant and they were producing products at the maximum capacity that they can, and they said that people will buy it. So they don't really, the role of the salesperson was not that important because people were going to buy it anyway. As it has evolved to from production orientated to a sales orientated, and currently we find ourselves more as a sort of a marketing consumer orientated approach to how we market, or how a business markets their products or services. The role of selling has also changed. When it was when production orientation and changed to sales orientation, or a more sort of sales orientated approach, it became a very and that's remember, that's where the approach is taken usually when you have excess of stock and you want to get rid of it, and you have aggressive selling techniques that you apply to get rid of those products. Maybe because you are replacing that product with a new upgraded version of that product, and then the business applies a very specific sales orientated approach or philosophy, and sales is very aggressive, and the role of sales of selling in that business is very, very important. Nowadays, however, people have realized that, you know what, if you sell something to somebody that they don't really need or they couldn't really afford, but they just bought into a nice sales pitch, they're going to be stuck with that product and they're going to be unhappy. And because they're unhappy, they're not going to return and buy from you again. So they've adopted a more sort of customer orientated approach. Customer and marketing orientated approaches are very similar. As a matter of fact, you can almost say that one is just a different name for the same approach, and that is where a lot of emphasis is placed on listening to what the customer wants, then going out and producing what the customer wants, because then the selling is easier because you are satisfying a need. That's where the listening part comes in. If you've listened to what the customer wants and you listen to what problems they have, and you can offer solutions to fix and solve those problems, they will buy that product or service that you are offering. It also requires you to do a lot of research and be very accurate when you're capturing your data. And we'll see later on in this chapter today that the role of the modern day salesperson has changed. And if I can just move to the next slide, you'll see that it has become more sort of a consultative approach. And with that, I mean that you are not focused solely on closing a deal, ticking a box, and moving on to the next customer. You're not just chasing numbers. You have certain targets that you need to reach, obviously, but you are not obsessed with reaching those targets. It's more the manner in which you reach those targets that is important. And that is what consultative selling is about. It's about forming a relationship with your customer. It's about identifying what their needs are. It's about providing solutions to their problems for them. Has anybody just giving me indication, raise of hands, you don't even have to type it. The Wolf of Wall Street. Who's seen that movie, The Wolf of Wall Street? Leonardo DiCaprio, about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, okay, good. Majority of you have seen it. There's a scene in that movie where just before he sort of started his business, what the movie is all about is where him and a few friends that he got involved were sitting in a restaurant and they were chatting, and and it was about how do you sell to people, and he gave one of his friends a pen and he says, sell that pen to me. And the person took the pen and he said, can you write your name for me on a piece of paper? And his reply was, I don't have a pen. There we go. Deal done. It's a supply and demand situation. If you can offer somebody a solution to a problem, his problem in that scenario was that he didn't have a pen, but he had to write something down. So if somebody selling a pen at that stage would be satisfying his need. And that is what consultative selling is to pay attention to detail, to follow up with your customers. Are they happy? Because if you can deliver that kind of service to them, you're building that relationship with them that is going to result in the retention, retaining that customer, and they will come back and they will buy again. As we have identified in marketing in the first semester, it costs you 5 times more, or at least 5 times more, to get a new customer than to keep a current customer happy. So why wouldn't you pay attention, and why wouldn't you want to form a relationship with your existing customers and keep them happy? It just makes sense. Your sales numbers are going to be better as a result. No problem, Teresa. I had slow internet this morning at one point. It's much better now. We are scattered all over South Africa. This HCM group, and we all have different challenges. Thanks for letting me know, and that's a good example of the communication that I would like to encourage. We follow throughout this semester. Keep us informed of where you are and what your challenges are, because it's going to be different for everybody. Then at least we know and we can address it. And thankfully, as I said, there are recordings that you can watch at a more convenient time. Right. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of personal selling? Some of the advantages, most importantly, in my opinion, is the fact that it's flexible. It means that you can modify the situation based on the feedback that you get from a customer. If you're the salesperson and you're approaching a prospect, you're informing them about the product that you have, and they have questions which they in return ask you. You're gathering more information. And that information you will use, and you will maybe change your initial approach. to steer it closer to offering a solution to the problem for the customer has, and that's only if you engage in the listening process, and trying to build a relationship of trust between you and the potential customer before you actually advance to the closing part of the transaction where you actually make a sale. So it is a very flexible scenario. The one script is not going to work for another person. If you pick up the phone, you phone 5 clients, you'll probably have to use 5 different approaches. There are 1 or 2 or 3 important aspects that will be part of each of those 5 conversations, but you'll have to have the ability, I think, to adapt. And why is it an advantage? It's an advantage because we can now satisfy the need of the customer, not just trying to sell something to him or her. The downside, however, is that, you know what, it can be expensive because to be very effective in selling, you need to make a lot of calls initially when you start off and you haven't really built a database yet. You are going to make quite a number of calls before you get the opportunity to make an appointment, because remember, the first thing, and we'll see that in the selling cycle, the first and important thing is when you're trying to when you're in the sales cycle, selling process, basically, you are trying to sell an appointment. You're not trying to sell a product. You want the opportunity to be able to meet with that customer. I know it's modified, and it had to be modified, and it's different now that it's different now that we are in COVID. But how did it? Welcome, Andre. How did it change from what it was traditionally? It hasn't changed. In the past, you made a phone call. The guy's interested, or the person is interested in the product that you're offering. They make an appointment with you. You go, you demonstrate the product to them, and you make a sale. There was a face-to-face contact. Now that doesn't happen nowadays. But the face-to-face has now changed from to a face-to-screen or screen-to-screen, basically. It's still an appointment that you're trying to sell, because you don't want to provide too much information for the customer immediately. You just want to know, are they interested? If they're interested, are they interested enough to make an appointment, so you can actually in detail explain to them the benefits of the product you're trying to sell to them. And then obviously the other disadvantage is the fact that bribes, unethical practices, that's, yeah, everybody's personality is different, but I think if you are tempted often enough, it's a very strong person to takes a very strong individual to not at some point give in. And it depends on the circumstances, how desperate you are. I mean, very often, especially when the management style at a business is as such, where you are under great pressure to make your sales targets, and you know that there are huge negative impacts. You might lose your job. You might not, you might not be paid if you don't reach those targets. People sometimes use unethical methods to be able to close transactions, so they can actually still reach their target. So that's a potential disadvantage of personal selling. Right. Let's move along and see what. And then we're talking in general about selling as part of the introduction to sales. And I think we've realized that by what we did earlier this morning, by looking at the evolution of the different marketing philosophies that businesses and management at businesses have taken over years, the production orientation, the sales orientation, the marketing customer orientation, those are all familiar to you from first semester marketing. And you can see that the role of the salesperson and the role of sales and selling has also changed based on what particular management approach a company has. I think we could take it back to pretty much a time when the production orientation has been very popular, and that is when in Europe after the Second World War they were rebuilding the economies, basically restructuring the European economy, and they changed from a centrally planned economy to a sort of a market-based economy, and that meant that it was more important to be able to deliver the right product in the right quantities at the right time to be successful. And that only started happening once the marketing or customer orientated approach has become evident with most businesses. And it obviously resulted in very positive, or had very positive results. There was an increase in demand for products. You can just imagine. I mean, it's sometimes people think that the salesperson has ulterior motives because they are chasing sales targets, and they are not. There's no sincerity when they offer advice about products to you. I enjoy watching people walking into a retail store because you have different types of customers, and we'll deal in future chapters with the different customers as well. As a matter of fact, I think it's the next chapter. I'm not sure. Let me check my textbook. I think the next chapter we're looking at the customers, because customers in the buying process, chapter 2. We'll probably start with that tomorrow. But that you have different customers who, some people walk into a shop, they know what they want, they don't want to be bothered by a salesperson, and then you have people who need the assistance of a salesperson, even if it's just to give them that final reassurance that they are making the right decision. And I know it's very difficult from the perspective of the salesperson, and that only comes with experience on when to approach a customer and when not. There are certain, and we'll do that in chapter 3 when we're looking at non-verbal communication. There are certain signs that indicate to you that the customer is struggling, that the customer is in doubt, that the customer doesn't necessarily need persuasion, but they need more information before they make a decision. And that should be your cue to actually enter a situation that can result in a sale for you. And it's the vibe in different retail stores. I've also picked up is quite different. Some have a very aggressive approach still, where there's salespeople standing around, and they almost, if somebody walks through the doors, there's 3 people running at you to help you. That's usually when I get very scared. Right? For various reasons. Maybe I'm not that type of person who don't like that kind of sales and approach, or maybe maybe I'm not used to that kind of service. Regardless of what my motives are or what my reasons are, it's actually very interesting to exercise to go to a shop, or when you're having coffee in a mall. I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I've been in the mall for the last 6 months, and that's by choice, because I prefer to avoid the crowds. But I used to really enjoy watching people when I sit in a coffee shop, and just the different approaches and in different shops. I was looking. I was always sitting outside a coffee shop. You know, in a mall where you have your outside tables, because that gives me a better view of different shops in the immediate area and the different types of customers. The way you can see there's the purposeful individual who walks in, he knows what he wants, he's in and out the shop, and I think most males are like that. To be honest with you, I know I'm a shopper like that. Gone are the days where I can actually spend half my day in the mall. I go to the shop that I have to go to because I have a specific product in mind that I want to buy, and I don't shop around. It's but we've all been through that. We've all had we all had the other approach, where we did spend a lot of time and we didn't really buy anything. It was just a social interaction and the outing that was actually the motive for the whole activity. But I think most importantly that I've picked up in my observations when I sit having a cup of coffee and watching different customers behave in different ways, and how different salespeople treat same customers differently, and you'll find that the more experienced salespeople are the ones who hold back. They are friendly, they welcome you, and they let you go. They let you go, but they are aware of where you are in the store, just in case you need information. The young, enthusiastic, inexperienced salesperson is the one who's almost like a dog, tagging behind the customer through the shop, like a shadow. And you know what? Not too many people like that. I think now it's probably not an approach that too many salespeople in retail shops will take with the social distance that they need to actually have. But no, I think importantly, and as I said, we're talking in general as part of our introduction to what sales and what personal selling is specifically. And this is where we'll finish today. We've got 10 minutes. I would like to leave last 5 minutes or so just for general questioning and feedback from everybody on where they are and what they are struggling with, or what they found interesting, what they want me to repeat from the session that we had for a particular day. So we'll finish with, I think, by briefly going through the steps in the selling cycle. It's definitely important. It's easy, but it's important to follow. And it's also one of the questions that you have to, or one of the concepts that you have to cover for your assignment 1, where these particular steps are applied in a sales in a specific case study scenario. So right, just took a sip of tea, and yeah, first step. Let's go through the steps individually, and stop me at any time if you're unsure. But basically, it starts with prospecting. Prospecting is where do you find your customers? Where do you find your potential customers? There are different ways, and this is probably one of the aspects, and it's also covered in your assignment 1. How have your prospecting efforts and methods, how did you have to change that now during a pandemic? Because there are different methods, and we'll chat about it tomorrow again when we have a sort of a summary for the week. Prospecting, there's a chapter specifically on prospecting, then we'll go into greater detail as to the different methods, but that is all the efforts that you are going to engage in to find new customers or potential customers. How do you a potential customer needs to become a qualified prospect, because you're only working with qualified prospects. In other words, do they have the means to actually afford the product? Do they have a need for that product? Otherwise, you're going to be selling to the whole world, and you're going to get 99% of the time people are going to say, no, I don't need it, because you have not done your prospecting properly and qualified the prospects. When the prospecting process starts, you start with everybody. But part of the prospecting process is to eliminate the ones who are probably not going to buy your product, doesn't have a need or can't afford it. The pre-approach, as I said, step 2, is where you are now you're picking up the phone and you're trying to set up an interview so you can share the information with the customer. Okay. Step number 3, following that, is if in the pre-approach the answer was yes, I can meet you next Thursday or what time suits you, you make an appointment. Step 2 is to sell the appointment. You actually get to step 3, which is now called the approach, and that is where you meet the prospect. You're going to do step 4, and that's do your presentation. And each of these steps is an individual chapter in the rest of in the textbook. The presentation itself, initially, just an introduction, essential information given to the customer or the potential customer, and sit back because you want now them to, step 5, provide you with feedback. What's their opinion on what you have just said? They will probably have a few objections. That's step number 6. How are you going to be dealing with these objections? And objection is very important to remember, should not be taken personally. They're not saying no for you. They are saying no to the product that you are selling because they might not have a need for it or they might not have enough information. Always treat an objection as an invitation for more information. People object because they're unsure, and they're unsure because they don't have all the information to be sure before they make a decision. Then you're going to do a trial close. You're going to ask specific questions that will lead to the close. I mean, just to make sure, and that's where the verbal and non-verbal communication in chapter 3 becomes important. You need to know by the way in which people respond, certain words that they use to respond, and certain mannerisms and gestures that they use is an indication that they are ready to buy the product. And that's where the closing comes in. That is where you actually now make the deal and you shake on it and you say, thank you very much. Hope you enjoy your new VW Polo. And then obviously to follow up. Very, very important to follow up, especially because we said that nowadays salespeople has moved, as their traditional role has evolved based on the different marketing philosophies or approaches or orientations that businesses have, to a more sort of customer orientated approach, which means that the customer comes first and you listen and you build relationships, and that is crucial to build that relationship that can result in retaining the customer. In other words, them returning to your shop and buying from you again, because that's what you want. You want to eventually convert them to become loyal to your brand or to your shop, and that's where the after sales follow-up becomes so very, very important. Is there any of these steps that's more important than one of the others? No, there's not one of these steps that you can actually take out. In some cases, there are some of the steps that you combine based on the circumstances, but in general, people, unfortunately, it's a structured manner. And if you take it if you approach the whole process of selling in this particular manner, it will definitely increase your chances of success. Right. We've got a couple of minutes to go before the end of the session. I'm going to open the floor, so to speak, for any feedback, any questions, any concerns. It could be related to something that we said yesterday. Could be related to the assignment. Teresa has a question, I think, or maybe not a question, maybe just feedback to say everything is okay. Anybody else? I'm just going to tick off everybody as they've joined on the attendance register. Any questions, anybody? Teresa, yes, on the font on a font that your software might offer you. I will get you feedback tomorrow. Let me just check with everybody, because I know that the font that that's now recommended by us for us to use by Stadio is also not one that appears on my on my desktop, but I made a plan. But I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you by tomorrow just to confirm if there's any particular alternative that they suggest we use. To me, that's not the greatest challenge. I would not necessarily penalize somebody for using the wrong font, but obviously we want things to be standardized. Stanley says everything's fine. He hasn't got any questions. Good, good. Anybody else? Just waiting for Luwandu. Luwandu, anything, Luwandu? No problem at all. Right, everybody that's attended today, I will upload this recording, and like I did with yesterday's one, during the course of the afternoon. I've still got a few more sessions and classes this morning. Usually in the past I did it between classes, but now we've only got 5 minutes between classes, so it's not going to be possible. I just want to, before we leave, remind you that tomorrow we have 2 periods. Tomorrow we have a bright and early one, I think. I think we've got 8 o'clock, 8:05. Let me just check my schedule. Where are we tomorrow? Yeah, tomorrow morning we have the first period, 5 minutes past 8. And then we have another one at 20 past 10. Okay. So tomorrow's classes, we've got 2. We've got the first and the fourth period. We'll finish today's chapter 1, the introduction to selling. There's only a few slides left, and so you're more than welcome to share, and there will be opportunity to share your own selling experiences from a consumer's point of view or customer's point of view tomorrow. During the first period, and then in the second period we'll start with chapter 2, which specifically will focus on the consumer, because at the end of the day, without the consumer, who do we sell to? We do not, in sales, we do not have a business if we do not have customers. But it's very important to help us in how successful we are in our selling, that we understand to a certain extent how and why customers behave in a certain manner. Okay, so we'll quickly address that tomorrow in the second period. If nobody else have any questions, thank you very much for the day. This concludes the session, and for those who have a period immediately after this, good luck, and good luck for the rest of the day. Stay safe, and we'll chat again tomorrow morning, bright and early first period. Okay, have a nice day, everybody. And of course, Andre, yes, make good decisions. Thanks, guys. Have a nice day. We'll chat again tomorrow.
Thanks, Jaco.
It's a pleasure. Thanks.